So we want to talk about the palace again, focusing on the palace. The boundaries. My goodness gracious. Yeah, you're on record. So, you know, I mean, well, something like that. I mean, you know, we can tell stories, and we can tell stories that there's no implications, or we're not going to hurt anybody's feelings, or, you know, we're not going to be criticizing anybody openly, or, you know, that's not for this forum. But, so, I have a couple things that I want to read because a couple devotees sent some things in. I'm just going to read one first because I can't find the other one, but this is about the women, the artists, the women artists at the palace, because they didn't really get represented yesterday, and I had asked people to send me things. So yesterday Tulsi said, I don't think the women artists got represented very well. So I said, well, send me something and I'll read it. The woman Tulsi. She's in Mexico right now. And then I have one from Vishvadika also. All right, so can I read those? All right, so we'll start with that. Okay, this is from Tulsi. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. I visited Prabhupada's Palace of Gold for the first time in the spring of 1979, so I missed all the planning and beginnings of the project. I couldn't believe anyone could build something so beautiful, let alone an entire community. I had just finished my art studies in graduate school and had no future plans. So after some coaching from Kaladri Prabhu, I agreed to come to New Vrindavan only for the summer to help with some of the remaining art projects. I was new to Krishna consciousness and wanted to be part of something unique and special. So Prabhupada's altar. My first project at the palace was painting the panels on Srila Prabhupada's altar under the supervision of Jaya Krsna Prabhu. Woo! I was told Bhaktipada wanted the panels to look like polished red granite. A few days had passed before I met Bhaktipada for the first time. He came to the altar. As I was painting one of the panels with the glaze I made of red paint and varnish. I didn't see him walk up, so it startled me when he said Hari Bol, and I dropped the cup of varnish on the onyx floor. Bhaktipada asked, what was that? I said, varnish. He said nothing, shook his head, and walked away. Not a good first impression on my part. I felt terrible. Mother Purnamasi, Mother Saradia, and I hand-painted the panels of Krishna's pastimes that are installed below the dome of the altar. That's inside the altar, those pastimes underneath there. I enjoyed painting with Purnamasi and Saradia, not only because they were wonderful artists in service of Krishna, but they also told me lots of beautiful stories about Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's murti on the altar was the first D-Day I painted at New Vrindavan. Prabhupada's bedroom. I was next assigned to help Mother Purnamasi paint Srila Prabhupada's bedroom ceiling. Mother Purnamasi was also caring for her new daughter, Tanhara, and Bhaktipada felt it was taking her too long to complete the project. Therefore, we were told we had to complete the ceiling in 1 week and stay on the scaffold on our backs until it was done, which we did for the most part. And by Krishna's grace, we managed to stencil, paint, and gold leaf the entire ceiling within a week. Wow. That's an amazing story. I mean, it's amazing that they painted it, but I didn't know it was a week. Prabhupada study, the next project I was assigned to, again, had me on my back and on a scaffold. This time, Mother Tilakini and I gold leafed the entire ceiling of Prabhupada study. I don't remember how long it took us to complete it, but we worked day and night and developed a lasting friendship we still enjoy today. Last days. The closer it got to the palace opening, the more the entire community was involved in the marathon. We were working day and night. Bhaktipada would bring us prasadam, and the cookie throws were so much fun. I will always remember Bhaktipada's leadership and the labor of love and devotion displayed by the Brijabasis as they completed Prabhupada's Palace of Gold. I am humbled and honored to have been able to serve Krishna and Srila Prabhupada in this way. Hare Krishna, your servant Tulasi Devi Dasi. Hari Bol. Okay, we can clap. I hope she gets to view this. I'm going to read from Vishvadika, and then we're going to have some sharing, and I'll try to find the other things. Okay, dear God sisters and God brothers of New Vrindavan, please accept my obeisances, my humble obeisances to all the devotees whom I grew up with in service. Through all those years, with the ecstasy and the agony of being an inmate of the Dham was a daily palpable reality. In my heart, the ecstasy did and still does overpower any difficulty, big or small, because they were all opportunities for us to become Krishna conscious together. Now I am living and serving in Mayapur, but my heart is always with Brijabasis. My small apartment reminds me every day of the mercy of Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra through pictures of their beautiful form, New Vrindavan devotees, and Srila Prabhupada in New Vrindavan. There are so many memories of the palace marathons, and here's a few. The first time I saw the palace, it was an outline of cinder blocks next to a local dump. Kirtanananda was showing to my father-in-law and describing his plans. I guess that would be Mr. Rich, Vana's father, yeah. And describing his plans. It was my first tour of the palace. We walked from room to room, hearing vivid descriptions in each room. One time I was working with Mother Parayana on a very hot summer day in a tent, lying on our backs, gold leafing the rosettes under the overhang around the palace. I remember exactly that it was to the right after entering the hallway, the first stained glass window, rose garden side. It was so hot. We should have been talking about Krishna, but we were talking about escaping and going for a swim in the Jamuna. Then we would return, maybe. Kirtananda opened the plastic curtain and said, but now you are swimming in the ocean of nectar of devotion. Oh, he must have overheard them. Our reply, we are? We did not leave on our little adventure. I had and have no regrets. Even though I was an ashram teacher, I would go and serve at the palace whenever I could during school hours. One day I was working with Bhakti Nidhi Devidasi on the intricate ceiling above Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa sign. That's all the little pieces. There were several layers of scaffolding to get us close enough to the many little carved things. Finally, we were done. That scaffolding was taken down, but we looked up to see that we had missed a spot. Bhaktinidhi said, who will see? But perfectionist that I am, I could not tolerate. Reset the scaffolding? Forget it. Okay, I will put one plastic bucket on top of another. You hold it steady. Up I went. And when I stretched to touch up, I thought, this is not a good idea. Right. 2 seconds later, the buckets toppled, and I was thrown to the next scaffold layer. By Krishna's mercy, not to the marble floor. Trying to get up was excruciating. Later found out it was a dislocated hip. So the men fashioned a kind of gurney from poles and tarps. Down the stairs we went. Just then, some impromptu visitors, probably local people, as they used to do this, were coming up the steps. I hadn't reread this. With curiosity and some compassion, they looked at me. Then one devotee explained as he was struggling to maneuver the stairs. I'm sorry, I'm just reading ahead. Then one devotee explained as he was struggling to maneuver the stairs. Yep, folks, this is what we do. We work them till they're done, then we haul them away. Oh, Krishna. Oh. I'll say it again. Yep, folks, this is what we do. We work them till they're done, then we haul them away. Oh, Krishna, the look on the horrified faces of the onlookers was too much. In spite of the pain, I just started laughing and laughing. I certainly hope someone else gave a more reasoned explanation to those locals. Many of them knew us as the Swami's white slaves. NB, I don't know. 1 week later, I was at work again in the mold shop, touching up rough edges on molds with a heating pad wrapped around my waist and a long extension cord around the table and chairs to the nearest outlet. We were either crazy or very determined. Thank you for allowing me to be part of the celebrations in this small way. Please pray that I will be permitted to continue my service to Prabhupada here in Mayapur. I pray that I will somehow be part of Krishna's plan to make New Vrindavan my home again one day. Your humble servant and God sister, Vishvadika. Vishvadika. She was an ashram teacher. Okay. That's one way to start. I'm sorry, I hadn't reread that one, so it's caught off guard. So, yeah, Ambadar, but I wanted to give you a chance because you said you had a short share, and he wanted to share yesterday. So I'm going to give you a chance, and then I won't have to worry that I'm neglecting you.
Thank you.
And then, actually, let's use this one here because this one is a battery-powered one, and it may run out.
All right. Thank you, Prue. Thank you. Some of you know me, some of you don't. You don't recognize me because you're saying, I don't remember seeing him in New Vrindavan. Although I've been coming here off and on since 1970. We used to travel from Detroit, and we always stop by for when we were doing Sankirtan before we go to, and we knew we had to deal with the rock festivals and all the scenery in the rock festivals, and this was always the first place we'd come. And I remember having the opportunity to bathe in the waterfalls, and that was Keshigat. That was so wonderful. There was nothing like it. But again, my name is Jadava Acharya, and I was thinking when I was invited to come, I said, I know I've done a few things once in a while in the kitchen here and there. And then I was thinking to myself, you dumb butt, don't you remember that you helped to make the Prabhupada murtis for the temple, for the palace, and the writing Prabhupada? Akhilananda, many of you know him. He's such a wonderful devotee. After Prabhupada left the Fate Studios in Los Angeles, Lochandas made the statue of Prabhupada as it was going to be. As a matter of fact, you also know Agni Dev. Agni Dev was the model for Prabhupada's body. He looked at Agni and he said, oh yes, your body is just like Srila Prabhupada's. And so he was using him as the model. And what happened is that we would start making these murtis. We made 72. The first 72 murtis that were sent all over the world. And I remember very clearly that we had to make the writing Prabhupada as well. And that took a lot of endeavor, but it was so blissful because we didn't understand how wonderful these were going to turn out to be, because no one had done anything like this before. Even people from out of the professionals would come and look and try to understand, how did you do this? How did you make these? Because they're going to last for hundreds and hundreds of years. And yet at the same time, all we did was like everything else. Prabhupada gave a direction. Well, the direction was given to us from other devotees. You do this, and this is how it turned out. So I've always, at a certain point in time, I have to stop and say that I do have a connection with New Vrindavan, and that will probably last well after we're all back home, back to Godhead. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ambadar wasn't here yesterday, so I want to give her a chance to share. You want to share something? Are you ready? Oh, Krishna, Krishna.
Haribol, everybody probably knows me, Ambadar. I really liked the name of the session for the women to speak yesterday, heroine stories. And I thought there's so many things I can talk about, but what I wanted to say, which I didn't really get to impart at the end of the last time I got to speak in a group here about the birth stories, was about the incredible surrender and the amazing work that every single woman that delivered here did. I'm an OB nurse. I graduated from a 2-year school in 1972. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm a registered nurse. I became a nurse at age 19, 1972, went to a school in New York City, or up from New York City. During my training, I saw 2 natural births, vaginal births, I'm sorry, natural births, but with forceps, that's how they did them in those days. And then I said, oh, this is not for me. I am not going to be an OB nurse, and I'm never having any children. It was barbaric. And so then did other things, did other kinds of nursing, came here, bless his heart, with my first husband, Prashadra, who lives in Idaho now, was not able to come. I thought we were going to Stephen Gaskin's farm, and we came here with our Volkswagen van, old hippies. And anyway, I didn't know anything about it, never been to a temple before. I had read a couple of Back to Godhead magazines. Anyway, they put us up in the barn, and shortly thereafter, our vehicle was put into Krishna's service. Tapa Punch Prabhu. Do you remember that? That's where I first heard this term, Krishna's mercy, Prabhu. Well, yeah, no. It kept us here. It kept us here. Anyway, at the time I came, Mother Parina and Mother Vidya were doing the baby deliveries, but as soon as Bhaktipad found out that I was a nurse, he thought that I knew something about it. And there were several blunders, and I kind of stepped back from that and did other things for a while. But when Dr. Nick came in 1979, we started doing baby deliveries again. And the first place we did, the first baby we did was Mother Amrita Prada and Bimbadara's daughter, Aditi, in what is now the Sacred Voices village, house that here in the property. There are a lot of people probably in the United States that, and I know it happens here in New Vrindavan, Mother Jamuna's daughters, and there are other very brave women that decide to go have their babies at home out here. But that is not the norm for the United States. I Googled it yesterday. The epidurals is where you're completely unconscious. I mean, you're not unconscious, but you're not conscious of what's happening. So the rate is like 79%. And so the woman takes no part in the birth process, really. They don't even know they're having what's happening unless somebody tells them, or they look over at the machine. They can tell what's happening. It's a whole different thing. As soon as they don't view birth, they don't view birth as a natural process, so they fear it's something to fear. And so we'll hear. I mean, in my hospital, I work at Wheeling Hospital. Really, unfortunately, now the only hospital in this area because the other two closed down a couple weeks ago. I work in the obstetrics department there, and I would say I'm pretty sure our C-section, our epidural rate is at least 90%. So no one wants to have babies. And then you hear stories, oh, it's too bad. She had to have that baby without an epidural. You know, like it's some horrible thing. And then they really do think that's just the worst thing in the world. The women in New Vrindavan gave birth in various locales, sometimes the barn. Many of these places had no running water. No running water. They gave birth in the barn, in various houses up and down the road. We never did have a birth down the temple, but many babies were born in that Sacred Voices house and also what is now the Wellness Center. But quite a few women before we had, or in between time when we didn't have facilities, they just were at their own homes. Regardless, the support that they had was so little that they really truly had to depend on Krishna to get through it. I think Dr. Nick and I gave them the assurance that everything was going okay, but that's not enough. That's not enough. If anybody's ever given birth, somebody come by and just say, oh, everything's fine. That's not enough. What we used, our epidural or how they got through it, and how I think every child that was born here couldn't have gotten off to a better start. We used Prabhupada's tapes, and we didn't even, I can't remember that we had anything besides just cassette tapes, but that's all we had was cassette tapes. And our two favorite tapes were Krishna Meditations. Krishna Meditations. I don't know how many how many babies in New Vrindavan were born to Krishna Meditation. We would just play it over and over and over again. And then the second favorite was Prabhupada chanting japa.
The meditation only came out in 76, so.
Yeah, I didn't start doing it till, well, I think Aditi was born in 78. I think I'm Aditi 78. Yeah. So we used those 2 tapes extensively, and then if anybody had other tapes, but there was always Krishna transcendental music playing, and it was just an amazing thing to me to see every woman. For a man, it's likened to running no matter how good a shape you are, running a marathon, and then you hit the wall. And if you're a runner, or you know anybody that's a runner, you hit the wall, you just can't do it. And whether it's number 1, 3, 5, 7, every woman gets to that point. They have to dig deep. They have to have something. There's nothing there. They're out in the middle of nowhere. No drugs. It's you. But it was them and Krishna. It was them and Prabhupada. And I got that just to see that level of just really pure surrender. And that's what I really appreciate with all the women that I took care of in Vrindavan.
Thank you. She really saved us, really. I mean, we had no clue what we were doing when we were having babies, really. No clue. I'll just give a quickie. So I was pregnant with Bhagavan, and Jamini was next door. And I had woke up in the middle of the night and had a few pains, and Bhokta came back from New York, 12 midnight. Then I went back to sleep. I woke up at like 1:15, and I started feeling some pains again. So I went over to Jamini's because she woke up at 1:15. So she woke up at like 1:45. Yeah, before everybody else. So I went over there and I was just talking to her, and like I laid down and was chanting Hare Krishna like 3 times while we were talking. She says, "Your contractions are getting pretty close, aren't they?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "I'm going to go over and get Brian and Ishani." So they came back like within a half an hour. They said, "Bhokta out." And, that was at 2:00 she went over. And I had Bhagavan at 4:30 in the morning. So that, it's like, and talking about hitting the wall, I just remember each time you get to the one point where you think like, I can't take this anymore. It's like, you're about ready to explode and burst and freak out. So, the 3rd time when I had Narahari, when I got to that point, I said, "Oh, that means the baby's coming soon. Okay." So you can get to that point and then go through it. So anyway, so now I want to leave it to an open mic, and I want to really invite anybody to speak that wants to speak. I'll, insert some stories. I still have to find one more from Vishnu Das. Yay, look at that. Woo! Woo! Wow.
I gotta sit.
Okay, you sit. Just don't get tangled up in this thing here.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but I'm going to try. I'm here not to talk about a story, but I'm here to represent Jai Murari. And he gives you all his love and stuff like that. I offered to carry Jai down here, and he's not strong enough. And so anyone that's got to see Jai Murari, God bless you, and stuff like that. But I would have made it. I don't know if I could do it. Anyway. There's some God brothers and God sisters that, helped me out a lot. I would have never been here without Prabhupada. This might insult some people, but I would have never been here without Bhakti Padmi. And there's so many God brothers here that I love, and God sisters and stuff like that. Jai's got a sign on his door, and it says, "Please be careful when you walk in because you might make him sick." It's surprising that I've never made him sick. He's doing great, though. He chants. He says that it takes him about a half an hour to say 1 round, but he's got all day. and he's reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and I just come here to represent Jai Murari. So he says that he loves you guys and everything like that. And like I says, I would never made it without my God brothers and my God sisters. Another person I'd like to talk about a little bit right now is that, you know, in 1979, I left the community because I decided that I could not become a Vaishnava, that I wasn't able to follow the 4 regulative principles. So I went to New York and I met Kelly. And she's my wife, and you don't see us around here much, but I would have never been able to render this service here in New Vrindavan without Kelly. I have 2 beautiful sons, Gopal and Haridas. I have a grandson now, Brendan, and I thank all you guys for allowing me to render service here in New Vrindavan. And, you know, they had asked me when they were interviewing me, like, what do you expect to achieve in the future of my life? I just want to help here in New Vrindavan. So I thank Jai Ram and Mahasundar and the new administration, especially Gopish that has put up with me for the last 8 years and stuff like that. And I love you, and I thank you for the service that you've let me to do here. And I don't know what to say. If I would work for another 200 years here in New Vrindavan, I could never repay back New Vrindavan what New Vrindavan has given me. I apologize for this humbleness, but I came here to represent Jai Murari. And, you know, naturally, all you guys, Nicho, you saved my life, you know, Tapa Kunj and everyone, all my God brothers and God sisters, I love you forever. All right? Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Tejamaya Prabhu, for your heartfelt care. And if anybody is visiting and wants to go up and visit Jai Murari before you leave, you know, it would be nice because it's amazing he's still around in that body. I know there are devotees who have really hard times with their bodies, but they really treat their body like a machine, and they just kind of give the body what it needs and manage the body, even though it's like breaking down. So it's just really amazing. So it's nice that he's all there in the heart. Yeah, he's very Krishna conscious, very Krishna conscious. No perfumes, no soap.
I have one quick little story about Jai Murari. While we're on the subject.
Yes, please.
Jai Murari was a plumber in New Vrindavan, even though he was a sannyasi. I don't know any other temple that a sannyasi was a plumber, which means he took care of the sewer. And things were always breaking down in that regard. And there was one time, I think Tilakini and I were in the deity kitchen, and we were doing some, peppermint sandash or something. We had the bottle of peppermint oil. And Jai Murari was at that time doing some work on the sewer, and he said he was complaining to Krishna, "Oh, I don't know why I'm supposed to do this horrible service. Everything smells so bad. I'm just mad at Krishna." And then I think Tilakini knocked over the bottle of peppermint oil. And he said all of a sudden, the whole sewer started smelling like peppermint. That's just, yeah,
Again, I want to say just really, we were all present to really miracles and how Krishna just answered our prayers in miraculous ways. And again, I just want to say, I think it was a lot because we really didn't really know what we were doing and how we were doing it. And we were doing things we didn't want to do. And we were praying a lot. We prayed a lot just to make it through. And we really did depend on Krishna. And so he came through for us too. Thank you. I skipped you, Sankirtan. Do you want to speak now, just in case you have to go? Yeah, because, huh? Okay. Well, if you want, you can speak now. You want to? Yeah. Just because He asked yesterday and I missed it.
I could use that chair.
Yes, you can use the chair too, yes. We can actually just keep it up here.
Okay. I really don't know where to begin. New Vrindavan actually is a pretty extraordinary place. One of the things for myself, all my life, I was never much of a joiner. Even when I was a kid, some of my friends asked me to join the Boy Scouts, and I was just totally against joining anything. Even when I lived as a hippie down on the Lower East Side, it was not very far from 26 Second Avenue. I didn't even really feel myself part of the hippies and being a hippie. But that's what's so amazing about New Vrindavan when I came here, that everyone was such a unique individual. You had like, you think that if you have like some organization, especially some religious organization, and people would conform to that, the standards of that organization one way or another. But still, even though devotees were following the four regular principles, still they were just such unique, extraordinary individuals, not only in the movement, and not only in New Vrindavan, but I found that later on around the movement as well. But the first time I visited here, New Vrindavan, is in 1976. Ruchi and I, we were living up in Madison, Wisconsin. I was with the Broome Street Theater. That's still existing in Madison. And we knew the Chicago devotees, and they offered to take us to the Janmashtami festival here in New Vrindavan. Ruchi was at that time pregnant with Sanat Kumar, Josh. And so I came down, went to the Chicago temple and drove here with the devotees. And so when we got here, it was early morning. Breakfast was just about to be served out down in Buhulavan. And I was online. And I didn't have any utensils or any plate or anything like that. I think the Chicago devotees, they had plates. But I was just online, getting up. And then when I got up to the table where they were serving out the prasadam, there were no plates, no utensils, nothing. And one devotee, he took compassion upon me, and he pointed that there was a big pickle barrel at the edge of the house. He said, go check over there, you might find something. And so when I looked in the pickle barrel, there was just, the barrel was full of broken glass, and a lot of it was broken jars. So I was kind of gingerly picking my way through the broken glass to find one jar that was unbroken. And I ran my finger around the lip of the jar to make sure that it wasn't chipped at all or anything like that. And so I went back online. First I rinsed it off, and then I went back online and had the morning prasadam, some oatmeal. I hope the guest services have improved since then. I'm sure. But another thing, in 1972, it was a wonderful celebration. One thing that struck me about New Vrindavan was the leadership. Kirtananda Swami. Prabhupada was staying up at the Madhuban house, and he was going to be coming down imminently. And so there was a huge crowd of the devotees right on the road. In those days, the road, this is all just recently paved in the mid 90s, but this road was a old country dirt road for many, many years up until the 90s. And so the devotees were eagerly waiting Prabhupada's arrival. They were chanting up a storm. And then there was a police car that showed up, and the guy got on the speakers, the police officer, and he was saying somebody had complained about that there was a nuisance and so much, noise, and so the police they wanted to have the road cleared. But the devotees, they were totally oblivious
to the police in their chanting of the holy name. And Prabhupada was coming pretty soon, imminently. And so I saw Kirtananda Swami with Vishnu Janan. They hurried down to the middle of the kirtan. They were trying to get people out of the way. No one was listening to them either. And what they wound up doing is pretty extraordinary. Vishnu Janan with his danda and Kirtananda with his cane, they started pushing people back and hitting people and pushing them back with their cane and danda. It was a remarkable thing to see. And I saw that actually, even though I was so covered over, I saw that they're doing this out of love, that they want the devotees to be here when Prabhupada arrived. They don't want some incident that will spoil Prabhupada's arrival down to Bahulaban. So that's one incident. Another incident happened up at the pavilion. It was the day after Janmashtami. There was a big festival, and there was a lineup. I'm talking about Janmashtami still. I haven't gotten to that. But so for Janmashtami, there was a huge lineup for the prasadam. Now the devotees, they all know what's going on. They got online pretty early. And all of the guests, the regular guests, I wasn't really a devotee at that time, I was just a guest. And there were so many other guests as well. They wound up in the back of the line. And the devotees were, just relishing the prasadam by the time the guests finally got up and got the prasadam. And so the next day, for the Vyasa Puj, early that morning, Kirtananda made a little announcement. This is up at the pavilion. And he asked, what are we celebrating? The question was, who is this festival for? And so one devotee said, it's for Krishna. No. And, Prabhupada, it's for Prabhupada. No. He said, it's for the guests. And so therefore, when the guests come for prasadam, they should be served first. And the devotee should wait. Not the devotee should just run up and grab prasadam and neglect the guests. And so I was really struck by that. That was really amazing understanding and perception of what Krishna consciousness is about. And so another thing that Prabhupada said, there was the Vyasa Puj at that time, and one devotee asked, there was a number of different questions, but one devotee asked, how do you compare yourself to Lord Jesus? Prabhupada said, Jesus is the Son of God, and I am the dog of God. So again, it just struck me how totally humble Prabhupada was. And when Ruchi and I finally moved here, she was talking about that the other day, and we moved here in 1976 from the Chicago temple. We've been living in the Chicago temple for several years. And so when Bhokta was driving us up the back old dirt road here, because the front road off of 250 was always guarded by two squad cars, made sure that none of the Hare Krishnas left or nobody came into New Vrindavan. And so we came up the old back dirt road. Now it's all paved, but and this is in the dead of night. Bhokta waited until like around midnight to come in. And so as we're driving and it's getting closer and closer to New Vrindavan, there is a swirl of energy that we begin to confront. It's a vortex. It's like we're entering into another dimension, into like another time zone. There was this swirl, and at one point we were kind of afraid of it. Ruchi and I looked at each other, but then we started chanting japa. And so Bhokta and myself and Ruchi, we were just intensely chanting japa, and this energy, this vortex, it grew stronger and stronger. And as we were driving, it was totally blackout, pitch black. And we didn't know where or how far this journey was going to last us. And so finally, we arrived and we stayed at the Gray House. At that time, Jai Murari and his wife and Narada Muni and Rasa Lila were staying at the Gray House. And the next morning, we went down to the temple. But in a couple of days, we were assigned one of the Prabhupada houses. There were 4 or 5 of them along the road. And the first Prabhupada house was occupied by Gaur Shakti. And he was the temple commander at that time. I hope you don't mind me telling you the story. All right, I won't tell it. No, it's okay. This is just the strictness of the devotees here in New Vrindavan. Well, I think a couple of people in the last few days mentioned how, they didn't feel part of New Vrindavan for like a year or 2 years. That they'd have to be at least here during one winter at least to feel part of New Vrindavan. And again, because of my mentality as an outsider and never wanting to join things, it took me like 4 or 5 years, really, to feel that I was part of New Vrindavan. And I think that finally came when I put together a one-man performance, an evening with Krishna Das Kaviraj. So I was inspired by Hal Holbrook. He was a Broadway performer. He put together a one-man play on Mark Twain. And so I had seen this years earlier. I went to college. I was majoring in theater. So when I was here, I was wondering, what can I really do? Because New Vrindavan was like a community. It wasn't like a city temple where everybody was just going out on Sankirtan. What can I do to really feel that I have something to contribute? And so I was thinking, well, maybe I should get into stained glass work or this or that or the other. Because when I joined the movement, I kind of like put aside any theater aspirations. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, my interest is in the theater. Let me try to make some contribution through the theater. And so I put together a one-man performance, an evening with Krishnadas Kaviraj. I think Nityodita was supplying the chanting for that program. It was down in Bahulaban, and I had been rehearsing it for like 2 months. And the makeup, one of the ladies did severe makeup with latex, where I looked like 90 years old. And so when I came out on stage, the devotees were totally shocked. And when I left stage, the devotees gave me a standing ovation. And that was, I think, in 1980. We've been here like for 3 or 4 years already. And then I kind of felt, yes, I'm part of New Vrindavan. I've made a contribution. I've made a singular contribution. This is one of the last things I'll mention is I've always fancied myself like making a decent halava. I enjoyed halava. I started making halava in Madison, Wisconsin. We had a Sunday feast there. And so Kirtananda, he asked me, this is like the summer before the grand opening of the Palace of Gold. He wanted to give the devotees that were working at the palace a special treat. And so he asked me to make halava. I think it was starting like in June. And so I was making halava throughout the summer for the devotees, just who were working at the Palace of Gold. And so I brought the halava up and served out the halava to the devotees. And then afterwards, I stuck around for a while. And so people were coming. And I started giving tours even before the palace was opened. Starting giving tours to people that were coming to, and Kirtananda saw that, and he saw that I was relishing that service. But then on August 1st, he wanted to open up on Labor Day weekend. He said, If anybody shows up, don't let them in. No more tours. No one's welcome until the opening of the Palace of Gold. And so this was kind of a premonition of my service for years to come. There was Lajavati, was an early tour guide, and what's that? Jalakalahari, and Mother Kanka, I think, was also an early tour guide. And so somehow or other, I've just stuck it out here in Vrindavan. I didn't have any place else to go and nothing else to do. I'm just depending upon the mercy of the devotees. One last thing is that since we were giving Sunday feasts, having Sunday feasts in Madison, Wisconsin, before we became devotees, our first friend here in Vrindavan was Mother Vidya. She came to our Sunday feast in Madison, Wisconsin, and we've known her for years and years and years. And then Dharmatma, with his crew, they would come and visit us. I think they came a couple of times. But on one of the trips, Mother Vidya took the opportunity, even though they were all brahmacharis, to jump in the van and come to New Vrindavan with them. And so we knew Mother Vidya, and then we had called her before we decided to come to New Vrindavan. And it's amazing how, people come for different reasons. We all come for different reasons with different expectations. And that would be an interesting thing to talk about. What are the reasons that we came? What were our expectations? And were they manifest or not? Of course, that's another totally different session. But I think that's something that I'd like to hear eventually. Thanks so much.
One
Hare
quick
Krishna.
thing, Sankirtan. Is the story about the otter, is that a quick story?
Yeah.
Okay, he wants you to tell the story about the
So
otter.
at one point, I was cooking Tejo taught me to make the old water and rice, and I was cooking. And then sometimes I would help on Sunday morning with the feast. And so one Sunday morning, Tejo and I were in the pits, and we wanted to check out on the sweet rice. The sweet rice was placed at the end of that little tunnel that Yudhisthira had made. And there was a little ditch there, and so they usually threw the sweet rice in there. Ambarish made it the night before. And so Tejo thought, well, let's go up and stir the sweet rice. And so we went up there, and lo and behold, there's this little creature. I don't know if it was an otter or a groundhog, but it's like trying to keep its head above water and swimming around the sweet rice. And so when we looked at that, yeah, you remember? No? And so anyways, fortunately I had brought the wooden paddle, the ladle with me, and I extended it, put it on the creature grabbed hold of it and climbed out and ran off. It must have been in there trying to paddle around to not drown, probably for several hours. So we went to Maharaj, Kirtananda. There's this creature floating around in the sweet rice. What are we going to do? Can we serve it out even? Kirtananda says, you have to. Otherwise, the devotees will riot.
All the creatures. We're going to talk about all the creatures. Okay, I'm going to read two quick stories and
I'm going to say, I love you guys,
okay.
but my back is going out,
Okay.
and I'll see you in another 50.
Oh my gosh. Haribol, thank you for coming, Tejo. Thank you for representing Jaya Mangala Prabhus. Thank you. Here's a quick story from Devada. He wrote that he was in the plow department when the palace was being built. And he remembered being up at the dump with the horse team and the wagon dropping off a load. And Kirtananda Swami showed up as he could anytime in any place. He was wondering what was taking me so long because he wanted me for something else. So he told me this would be the future site of Srila Prabhupada's home, the dump. We inmates were always anxious for Srila Prabhupada. I remember hearing the words, Srila Prabhupada is coming. And then this other story about the palace is he was at the opening and he was cleaning out the outhouses with the big vacuum trailer and brand new Deutz four-wheel drive tractor. Everyone was thinking, look at this advanced devotee. He is so qualified to operate this expensive, heavy equipment. Plus, so humble, he is cleaning out the portable toilets. Then I heard, hey, move that thing. You're blocking the traffic. It was Maharaj, and he was coming towards me. Why are you taking so long? Nobody can get by. But then, to my surprise, he walked up to me and gave me a big hug. So I remember whether you're driving a big Deutz tractor, a team of horses, or a pair of oxen, if you please Guru, Krishna is pleased, and your life is perfect. That was Devada Prabhu. Haribol. I got to read these because these people are like expecting me to read these. So this one is from Ajaya Adipurusha in New York. Here, I arrived in New Vrindavan in 1974, a penniless hippie hitchhiker. The morning I arrived, Kirtananda Swami asked me if I would like to come to see Srila Prabhupada's palace. This is 1974. I was surprised. I didn't know Srila Prabhupada had a palace. We drove up a washboard bumpy road from Bahulaban to the site where Srila Prabhupada's palace is now. When we got out of the vehicle, all I saw was a slightly rounded hilltop, partially covered with a dump site. There was an old mattress with inner springs sticking out of it, assorted debris, and some beer cans. At the top of the small hilltop dump, I saw two devotees with shovels walking around a piece of plywood that was laying flat on the ground. The devotees were using the piece of plywood as a platform to mix a batch of wet cement. They were doing it by hand with their shovels. Somebody told that story yesterday, going around and around and around mixing. Nearby, there was a ditch about 1.5 feet wide, maybe 10 feet long. There was also a stack of gray cinder blocks. Apparently, the devotees were putting cement in the ditch to form a foundation to place the cinder blocks on. At each end of the ditch, there was a stick standing upright in the ground. There was a line of string running from one stick to the other end of the ditch at the other end. It seemed like the string was serving to mark, looking at me with incredible bright smile. Kirtananda Swami inquired joyfully, ecstatically, "What do you think?" I honestly didn't know what to say. All I saw was dirt, cement, a few beer cans, and an impossible dream. But out of his boundless love for Srila Prabhupada, Maharaj was obviously seeing something I just wasn't seeing, Srila Prabhupada's palace. Feeling quite awkward out of cutesy, not wanting to dampen Maharaj's enthusiasm, I answered kind of sheepishly, "Well, it's nice, wonderful." Who knew? Okay, that's from Ajaya and Adipurusha. Okay, so we got a volunteer for the next thing. You want to volunteer? Okay, you just here. And we got to try to keep them a little short because we've only got an hour and 45 minutes, and we've got a lot of people that want to talk. So short, short and sweet.
Yeah, I'm just going to take you back for a minute to the pre-palace days when we were living out here on this ridge. And I was cutting wood for the Madhavan temple. And the palace was just kind of a gleam in Kirtananda's eye at that time. And we had a family that was living up the road in that house that is now the wellness center. But the house was up halfway up the hill there on the right. There was a family, Karmis. We knew them. You know, they invited us to dinner a few times, but, you know, Kirtananda didn't want them there because he had ideas for a construction project up on the hill across from there. So he said to me one day, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to hang this sign right up on the tree across the road from their house." Okay? And I don't know who painted the sign, but it was a sign of a like high-rise apartment building with this very dark-skinned family, standing in front of it with weird clothes on, and it was designed to kind of like encourage them to sell, and they eventually did. They sold. That was a very effective sign, and we didn't even know, living out here at the time, that there was going to be a palace. There was some talk about building a house, for Prabhupada and everything. But at that time, it's just like they just discussed, it was like a party spot, okay? The beer cans were prolific, and people were always parking up there, partying until wee hours of the morning. And I personally, got a lot of people out of there. But I was cutting wood up there. We didn't have chainsaws either. We were using cross-cut saws and axes, and we skidded the wood out with a team of oxen, my little half-grown baby team. Yes, I was with poor Kamalavati at that time. Here's a woman that was raised in a very affluent family, Rockville Center, Long Island, and she married me and took up life on the frontier. And when I say frontier living, I'm not kidding, okay? Not even a little bit. I was busy building the farm, clearing land, cutting wood, all these things. She was busy with a little baby. They hadn't invented Pampers yet, okay? We were using bird's eye diapers, remember that? So she was busy washing the clothes at this little creek right there, right behind us. That was a little creek. She was just washing the clothes with rock, pounding them with rocks at first. It was amazing when I brought the washboard. She was like, "What the heck?" I had a washboard and like a little container to put the clothes in. Anyways, her life was a lonely one. And she told a story some time ago about how she was, busy trying to think of how to kill herself. It was plus the place was completely infested with copperhead snakes. Nobody had lived out here on this ridge for probably 100 years, okay? And this was an old log cabin still standing from the 1700s. Okay, in the barn too. So I was rebuilding that, and I carried a hoe with me, and if I had $1 for every copperhead I took out of this world, I'd be well-to-do today. We had them inside our house. We had them in my bed. Okay, this was the way it was here on this ridge. So I'm just going to tell you a quick story of that sign. Okay, I was doing a fence post by the road right across from the wellness center. And I looked up the road and I see this pickup truck. And I go, what are they doing? So I see him get out, rip the sign off the tree, throw it in the truck. And I go, this don't look good. He come on down the hill, right toward me. And I had my post bar. So I just stood in the middle of the road holding my bar. And he tried to get past me, but I just stood there, and he goes, he goes, what are you, some kind of troublemaker? And I go, no, sir, I'm not a troublemaker, but I was just wondering if you would bring that sign back that we saw you put in your truck. And he goes, we didn't take no sign, okay? And you're a troublemaker, and we are the law around here. We're going to take care of you once and for all. Anyways, I paraphrased, but I remember the story perfectly for the first edition of the Brisbane Spirit. I wrote that story just a couple of days after this incident. Anyways, it was an old guy and his 2 sons, and they were not happy, and they were drunker than you could believe, because